l'art doit quelquefois prendre la place de la politique, quand la politique, pour des raisons économiques, est bloquée.
It's important to be able to write about violence with the same intimacy with which I write about love.
We created the kind of community that allowed us to give expression to our dignity.
Black lives matter.
African young people.
Actually, I'm not a hero.
Bonjour. Welcome to this conversation in the framework of the 19th edition of the International Film Festival and Forum on Human Rights here in Geneva. We are going to talk about a gripping documentary, Coup 53, unveiling hidden information about a vital moment in contemporary history, the coup against Mossadegh in Iran in 1953. The film was selected last year at the festival. Then came the pandemic, and we're very happy and honored to be able to present it this year as a special screening. We are talking today with the very talented director of the film, Taghi Amirani, and the legendary editor, Walter Murch, also known for his work on masterpieces, such as Apocalypse Now, The Godfather Part 3, and The English Patient. Please ask your questions on the festival platform. And we're going to start with watching the trailer of the film, just to put us in the mood.
In 1953, the United States, together with Britain, participated in a coup in Iran.
Mossadegh and his government were swept from power in favor of General Zahedi. 300 killed and hundreds wounded is a conservative estimate.
The British government has never officially acknowledged its role in the coup.
I don't think at any time we really planned a coup d'etat.
These words have not been heard or seen for over 34 years.
Evidence that has the potential to turn a dark chapter in history inside out. Your British counterpart was in fact blank. Could you tell me something about the man blank?
He was somebody who felt that there were things to be said that hadn't been said.
We hit a wall of silence and denial.
How did it come to this?
So they tied him up, strangled him, and shot him.
My father is a real prime minister.
The coup in Iran is shaping politics to this day. The United States does not want democracy.
That's the sort of thing you won't find in any book.
So Taghi, I first wanted to ask you questions about the intimate reasons that made you start to work on the project 12 years ago in 2009. At the beginning, it was going to be a drama film with actors, if I read well. And you read a book, a very famous book called All the Shah's Men. And you thought, why would an American actually tell me about my own history?
Well, kind of like that, yes. The idea was to leap into the world of narrative fiction. This was going to be the first feature film for me. And when I started researching the subject, I found witnesses one particular witness, in fact, who was so eloquent. He had such incredible, vivid memories and very, very visceral delivery. And he was Mossadegh's part of his security team. He was his bodyguard. And he remembered very clearly the events of 53, the very particular day of the coup itself. He was in the house of the prime minister, involved in the defense of the house in a gunfight, and he was himself injured. When he... I took the camera along and I just interviewed him for research at the time, because even for a narrative fiction, if you're telling a story of a true event, you want to get as much information to put in your screenplay. By the end of the interview, he was so amazing, he blew me away, that I thought, well, there is no reason to do this as a fiction film. There must be more people like him. And that's when I switched back to documentary, which is what I've known for the last 30 years.
And then you started gathering all this information, and in 2015 you met Walter. And how did the two of you start working together? I think there is a link with physics.
Well, the timeline is very important. I thought of the idea in 2009. I met Walter in 2012, and he can tell us. He can tell you better than I can how that came about.
Yes, I was working on another documentary about the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva and the search for the Higgs boson. That's what this emblem stands for, the H for the Higgs. And I was in New York working on the film, and I was invited to an event at a gentleman's apartment. This gentleman, Jerry Orstrom, was also financing Particle Fever, the documentary about the physics, and Coup 53. And that's where I met Taghi, and we bonded over physics because Taghi graduated in physics from Nottingham University. And one thing led to another. He helped us get into a festival at Sheffield, a documentary festival. We'd been rejected by many festivals up to that point, a common theme in documentary making. And we kept in touch after that, and a lot of the independent financing for Coup 53 comes from the San Francisco area, Silicon Valley. And my wife and I live in San Francisco, also in London. We go back and forth. And Taghi would come and visit us to raise money. He'd go down to Silicon Valley, shake the can, come back, we'd count the pennies, and off he'd go. And I never thought that I would work on this film, but you can never predict in motion pictures what you're going to do next. But basically, after another project ended, my wife and Taghi, rather, put their heads together and said, what you need is a nice vacation from science fiction to fact. And so why don't we all go to London for maybe 6 or 8 months and work on this little documentary about the coup in Iran in 1953 with Taghi. Of course, I knew what she was talking about. And I thought, great idea. And long story short, that was 6 years ago. And here we are still working, promoting the film, which we only really finished in 2019. So Taghi has been working on it for, as you said, for 11 plus years. I've been working on it for maybe half that time.
So physics and science brought us together. I joke that it was actually the universe that brought us together, but in the true sense of the word, not in a kind of a hippie kind of way. I have to say, by the way, I studied physics. I just studied physics. I got a degree and went to film school. Even though I did that, Walter knows more about physics than I do. And in fact, even that T-shirt is his contribution to the world of physics and physicists, the standard model image for the Higgs. So let us get the record straight on that as well.
So actually, there is a hidden link to Geneva even before the start of the film, because the CERN is based here. And then, yeah, it was a very simple film to make, if I understand well, as Walter said, an easy and short film to make. There was 532 hours of rushes. Walter, you had to cut twice as much as you had to do on Apocalypse Now, right?
That's correct. And on Apocalypse Now, there were 3 or 4 editors working simultaneously. And so it gives you some sense of the power of the digital world that we live in now, that the post-production filmmaking part of this was basically three people, Taghi, myself, and Edie. Edie Franks, my associate editor. And that's just, it would be inconceivable to make this kind of a film using the traditional filmmaking techniques that were what we worked with on Apocalypse Now.
Yes, and what is also untraditional is that you worked on so many different layers, and especially you were discovering Taghi, and Taghi was discovering new information while the film was being edited.
Yes, when I joined the film in 2015, Taghi had assembled and shot probably 30 hours of material, which is a considerable amount. But over the course of the next 4 years, we just kept discovering more things. Taghi kept shooting more things. And in the end, when we finally locked the film, the hard drives that we were accessing had, as you said, 532 hours of material.
And the film, to go back to the film, it's also very powerful because it's so gripping. It's really intelligible both to people who knew nothing about the coup, but also to people who know a lot about it. So it's really a double approach that I think is so interesting in the film.
That was the challenge. That was tell the story to those who know something or a lot about it, and it's still interesting for them, and it still offers something new or a new perspective, and tell it to those who know nothing. Absolutely, they don't even know where Iran is on the map. That kind of level, and so we had to kind of tap dance around this line of comprehensibility and narrative clarity. Was it dense clarity and clear density, as Walter had? Yeah, we had it on the cutting room wall, our motto, dense clarity and clear density. Well, even for me, who I thought I knew some things, I mean, I grew up, the thing is, Iranians grow up with the story of the coup. It's something that's so ingrained in your psyche. It's the event that entirely changed the destiny of the country from 1953 to this very day. Everything that we experience with Iran's volatile and toxic relationship inside and outside Iran with the West is rooted in 53. So I thought I knew all about it, but even as you see in the film, even I was surprised by what we found, and that was the discoveries that we made that made the film into a thrilling investigation, both for us doing it and for the audience following it. Was a byproduct of it taking such a long time. When you have a lot of time to research, you're going to find something sooner or later. And the reason it took so long is that nobody wanted to fund this film. We had a Hollywood studio come in, a major Hollywood studio come in, and they pulled out. They ghosted us. All the other official funding organizations that support documentary makers rejected us. Everybody and their grandmother and their pets rejected us. So we had to raise the money, as Walter explained, independently from private sources, therefore my trips to San Francisco, mainly. 99.99% of this budget comes from America. But that meant, even though the problem of funding was a big problem, it meant whenever we shut down, whenever things slowed up, we had more time to look into archives, look into footage, documents, photographs, files, find new people. And that led us to the discoveries that we made and made it into a thrilling watch.
What did you know about the coup? What did you think you knew about the coup as an Iranian before you started working on the film?
Well, because I knew about Mossadegh, I knew about the date, FIFDH Mordad. It's in Persian, the date is, embedded in the memory. It's basically, it has the same significance, for example, when you say to Americans 9/11, all you have to say is 9/11. And in Persian, FIFDH Mordad. So I knew about the date, I knew about the coup, I knew about Mossadegh, but I never, it stayed with me, but I never delved deep into it. But it's, in a way, I think it's when you think your own personal story is entwined with the story of the coup. I wouldn't be living in the UK, really, if there was no coup, no revolution, no exile, no diaspora, no emigration. So my own experience is affected directly by this. My family's story and the Iranian story. I mean, there are about 4 or 5 million Iranians living in exile post-revolution. So, and I thought I knew, but not the detail, not the nitty-gritty. Whenever I make a film, curiosity is one of the driving forces. I don't start with a preconceived idea of what the film is about. I don't even have a screenplay or a script. It's just, let's go take a leap into the unknown and see where it goes. That's with all my films, but in this one particularly, because when we take the leap, we are taking the leap on camera during the production, during the shooting, and during the editing.
And you, Walter, what did you knew about Coup 53? Oh, the coup against Mossadegh.
Yeah, I had worked on Sam Mendes's film Jarhead, which was about the first Gulf War, the 1991 conflict with Iraq. And in the course of working on the film, I do research. And that's where I read up on the history of Middle Eastern oil, and that's where I met the amount of oil that was coming out of Iran. Iran was the first country in the Middle East to really gush with oil. And of course, there are many other countries now that do the same thing. And Britain, because of the historic relationships with Iran that goes back centuries, saw an opportunity, and they grabbed it, as you see in the film. Winston Churchill, who was a politician, very much politician at the time in the early years of the 20th century, said, "This is a prize from fairyland beyond our wildest dreams." Our wildest dreams, because they could get all of this stuff. So I knew those elements of it. The fact that Churchill turned the power for the Royal Navy from coal to oil based on Iranian oil. I knew that. But beyond that, I didn't know. So every film is a discovery. I was anxious to work on the film to discover more.
Yeah, and that leads me to my next question, is because there is a third layer on the film. It's a film about who writes history and how easily history is manipulated, how malleable history is, how subject to control, reinvention it is.
Yeah, that goes to the heart of it. Is it Churchill who said, "History is going to be kind to me because I'm going to write it myself"? Yes. He said that. There's another, my favorite quote, which I actually used when I wrote the first proposal for the film, comes from Harry Truman. Harry Truman says, "There is nothing new in the world except the history you do not know." And that's another reason to make the film, because this is the history a lot of people don't know. Yes, history is always written by the victors. The victims don't get to tell the story in the same way. There have been documentaries made about the coup before, television documentaries, both in the UK and elsewhere. What was important for me was to have as many Iranian voices and witnesses as possible, Iranian sources. Of course, I enjoy this dual nationality, the split personality of an Anglo-Iranian, my adopted home and my original homeland. I kind of bridge this cultural gap. I can have access to both sides. I go to the States quite a lot, and a lot of the sources are American. So the point was, reclaim the story, reclaim the narrative, and tell it your own way. And I hope we've done that. We've told it in our own way, in a different, refreshing way. The fact that it's made such a lot of noise, the fact that the story of the coup was headlined in all the newspapers when the film came out last summer, over 42 leading newspapers and websites and stations and media outlets talked about the coup. A lot of thought pieces were written, a lot of reviews were written. Goes to show that it was timely. The time was right, and it was done right.
Yes, and to go back to the Iranian voices, one of the very strong points of the film is that you hear these Iranian voices a lot of for the first time. You have people against the coup, people for the coup, and when you know that Iranian society is so polarized, how did you convince them to participate in the film?
They are polarized and not entirely. I mean, the polarization is interesting. Obviously there's a community of Iranian, for the want of a better word, royalists still supporting the Shah and the monarchy, and the Shah perpetuated the idea after the coup that this wasn't a coup. He celebrated the events of the 19th of August as a national uprising, Rastakhiz Melli. He dismissed the idea that this was in fact an orchestrated coup with the CIA, MI6, and Iranian agents, Iranian people as well. You know, this coup would not have worked without Iranian army officers, retired army officers, and internal factions. So there is this idea that this wasn't a coup. So that's one polarization. But, you know, that's essentially the only one. Everybody else knows this was a coup. Everybody else who was there knows it was a coup. Afterwards, there are 293 books written about the coup. Endless academics and historians have written their theses and their papers and documents on it. The Americans have released files. The State Department has released its papers and its history. It's pretty well documented. So the polarization, I hope, if anything, and I'll give you one example. Los Angeles is the hotbed of the Iranian exile community. One of the biggest Iranian exile communities lives in Los Angeles. And I don't want to generalize because this would be wrong, but you know, you may think they're essentially of a royalist sort of loyalty. Well, Los Angeles is the only place where we had 2 standing ovations in a big theater. So you go figure that out. So, yeah.
Yeah, the film just won the Silver Phoenix, the most prestigious award for a documentary at the FIFDH Film Festival last month. So the reception in Iran is astonishing too.
Yes, I was amazed. I never thought the film would actually be screened in Iran or get any traction, but it got selected for a documentary festival in December. It won the audience prize, and that led to it being selected in competition for the FIFDH Festival, the 39th FIFDH Festival that happened in February. And it won the I get confused with all it wasn't gold, it wasn't silver, it was a crystal phoenix. It was the crystal phoenix. But before the 2 Iranian festival successes, it's had an incredible run at festivals around the world. It premiered, the world premiere was at the most prestigious festival around, Telluride, which is for me the jewel in the crown of festivals in the world in terms of world premieres and subsequent festivals after that. We joke about this. In the reviews, we have the very right wing. We have the very conservative newspaper, The Telegraph, in the UK, and the Morning Star, which is a socialist communist newspaper, both loving Coup 53. You've united the right wing and the left wing over the film.
So it's absolutely astonishing to have this, this audience all around the world, in Iran, cinema specialists, historians, and I think part of it also comes from your excitement that we feel in the film and the passion you put into it, and the fact that you're in this film too, Taghi. That wasn't the case in the beginning. You came as a character in the film during Walter's editing, right?
That was Walter's idea.
Well, as I said, when I came on the film, there were maybe 30 hours of material. 5 or 6 hours of that was Taghi photographing himself just as a kind of video journal. He never intended to be in the film. And so I was interested in that, and because it's all raw material. And then over that summer, he shot the interview with Malcolm Byrne at the National Security Archive in Washington, D.C., who have this massive collection of documents from the CIA to study. And Taghi is confronted with a file cabinet, a single drawer pulled out, and in the middle of the drawer is all of the CIA material extant that's available about the coup. And he suddenly, he got this kind of wonderful expression on his face of real, and this was not planned. None of this was known in advance. And he suddenly thought, and you can see it on his face, that is why I'm here. The recent history of Iran was set on a trajectory by that foot and a half of documents. And when I saw that, I thought, well, he's got to be in the movie. Because, as you said, it is a contentious subject matter. There are different opinions about this. And so if we tried to make a Voice of God documentary, the question would immediately be, well, who is God? Who is telling us these things? And what's their point of view? Once Taghi comes out from behind the camera and there he is, he's telling it. And he's particularly suited to telling it because, as he just said, he's a dual national who was born and formed in Iran under the reign of the Shah, and then went to England for more education when he was 15 in the mid-70s, before the revolution, 4 years before the revolution. And so he knows both sides of the equation. And this film would have been impossible to make this film by anyone who didn't have that dual nationality. So all the more reason to put Taghi in place. I also just wanted to say something about the previous question, which is you may have gotten a misleading impression about all the success that the film had, but despite all these great reviews, despite the prizes, despite the audience awards, no distributor ever picked up the film. There would be initial enthusiasm, in fact, foaming at the mouth enthusiasm, and then within a week or so, people would just vanish. It would be like a slow motion fade. And we found this over and over and over again from August 2019 to August 2020. And on the 67th anniversary of the coup, we decided to release the film in mid-August and to celebrate that event. And that release, self-release, we released it ourselves using digital platforms and links to art house cinemas and organizations. And that brought out all of these fantastic reviews, but still no official distribution. Many places, the BFI was interested in distributing it, and then they weren't. And you could repeat that story over and over again. So the film ran into a headwind from the beginning, as Taghi said, and it's still running into this headwind of people loving it, critics loving it, but official organizations don't want to step up to the line and distribute this film. So we're doing it ourselves, and thanks to organizations like yourself, we are getting more and more publicity for it. But there is a strange X factor, which we've named the glowing orb, that there's something behind the scenes, who knows, that makes people want to stay away from this film in terms of distributing it.
Yes, and even during the editing for you, Walter, you always had production constraints, so you had to work on a sort of stop-and-go editing. Did you think, of course it was complicated, but do you think it helped in a way also to shape the story, to have this long editing?
Yeah, Taghi just addressed that question, that the fact that it took 4 years in the cutting room with these 9-month and 3-month blank spaces in between allowed us to set the blade of our plow, so to speak, deeper. And when you do that, you unearth shards of history that have just been buried too deep for films that have a more constrained schedule. They just can't go that deep. And we were able to go that deep, and the film is the result of that.
Yeah, sorry, Taghi. Yeah, Taghi.
So just going back to the industry resistance, I don't want to disparage my fellow industry people, but if they were insects, we have discovered the ultimate insect repellent. The Coup 53 is the gold standard in repelling anybody from the film business. It's just they vanish. We also coined this other phrase, which is the Coup 53 fade. People dive in with huge enthusiasm, and then something happens. There's something from that unbelievable wave of enthusiasm and love for the film, people telling us this is terrific. As soon as I get back to New York, I want to talk to you about distribution. This is mind-blowing, this is amazing, da, 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 da. And then something between that and a ghosting happens. But as Walter said, audiences love our film and embrace it. The ticket sales speak for themselves. Critics love it and embrace it. And ultimately, that's what matters. That's what will stay. And that's what will work. And hoorah for Geneva for screening our film this year, even though it didn't make it last year because of the pandemic. You're the heroes who are supporting this film.
Oh, thank you. And I see questions coming and coming, but and that's wonderful. Good questions, actually. We're going to go through it. But I just had another question for Walter. I'm still interested in the process of editing the film, because you actually compare your work as an editor with the work of a musician. You know, finding the rhythm, finding the right notes. And the words in English and in French are very different, editing and montage.
Yes, in France and Spain and Italy and Poland and Russia, montage is the word, and in a Romance language, montage means to put together or to build or to assemble. If you hire a plumber to install the pipes in your house, he will montage the pipes together. And the word editing, which in German and the Scandinavian languages also is Schnitt, and I forget the Scandinavian word, but they talk about the taking apart and the cutting down, but you have to have something to cut down. And when we first assembled this film, it was 8.5 hours long, the longest assembly by far of any film that I had worked on. And at that point, we thought maybe this is a 6-part series for Netflix or, you know, that kind of a thing. And we toyed with that idea for a week or so, wondering about it. But we, as you can tell, we had financial problems and time problems, and nobody was interested. And so we decided to make it a standalone film. And, you know, cutting down from 8 hours to 2 hours is what I do. That's the Schnitt part, the editing part of it.
Was it more editing, montage, or Schnitt? For Coup 53 specifically?
No, equally balanced, I think.
And actually, I have a question from Saba. Is there a plan to release a long version, 7-8 hours of the movie, maybe in several episodes?
Could be.
It could be. It's there, and I have to say the 8.5 hour assembly to me felt like a really good long movie. It was even though it was an assembly. It was a Walter Murch assembly. He even had sort of some kind of preliminary sound mixes and visual, flourishes in the film. And we sat for 2 days watching it, and it even felt like it had inbuilt cliffhangers, sort of end of episode moments. And so the material is there. In fact, there's a hard drive right in the corner of my room right now that has that 8-hour assembly on it. At some point, with a bit of time and with a bit of a budget, that could be turned into a series. And there'll be a lot more amazing material. For every minute of incredible material in Coup 53, the finished film, there's another, 4 hours of other stuff that's incredible as well. So the potential is there. But we're also doing a follow-up separate to the actual existing material about the stuff that's happened to the film since its release last summer. That's also as intriguing and as suspenseful as the film itself.
Absolutely. And actually, the film does not reveal secret information. It reveals hidden information and makes it interesting to a large audience. And to go back to the work you did, there are similarities in the way editors, filmmakers, and historians work. The historian will gather a significant amount of information, exactly how you did, Taghi, and at some point he or she is going to make sense of that information and, you know, start telling a story. Exactly like an editor, the historian has to take decisions on what to include, what to put aside, and the storytelling, it's a matter of taste, of sensitivity. How did you work on this about it? Did you feel this like a rhythm and like a melody and like a music that you did together? And who had the final cut at the end?
It's a good question. There are similarities and very big differences between how a historian or a writer of a book, history book, works to how a film works. A very different end product, very different audience, very different delivery system. The expanse of information and the detail a historian can go into a book is very different to what you can do in a 2-hour film. So although the process might be similar, the end result and the delivery is different. And ultimately for us is to tell the most clear, compelling story that's understandable and gives you the essence of what the story is, but it will inevitably leave out a lot of detail because you know, the 8-hour material is not in our 2-hour film. The 67-year historical research and books and papers are not in our film. Just one foreign State Department report, the Frost report, is 1,007 pages. Well, you can never put 1,007 pages in a film. So those are the differences. Final cut, I'm glad to say, because nobody backed us, because there were no executives, no studio, 2 people had final cut and you're looking at them. This was the most joyful experience I've ever had as a filmmaker. Nobody came to our cutting room in suits giving us notes, telling us what to do. It was just Walter and me. And the relationship just grew organically. You know, Walter did his thing. I did my thing. We would meet every night around 9 or 10 o'clock. He would show me the few minutes that he worked on that day. We have a conversation, you know, some notes, and then we go home and so on. So that you don't hire Walter Murch to edit your film and then stand over his shoulder to see what he's doing. So that was a dance. And I love the idea of coming in at the end of the day to be surprised. To look at the material I shot in one way and see how it's put together Walter's way, and you want to keep that joy going on. My room was next door, so I could hear the sounds. I could wonder what he's doing with that sound. I wonder what he's doing with that dialogue. But I would resist going in until the end of the day, and so that was the dynamic, the relationship.
Yes, and that's one of the
also we had many. You know, we weren't working in isolation. We didn't have executives, but we had many audiences. You know, we would screen the film repeatedly at various stages of it, and we'd get reactions. We would feel certain things, as you always do when you watch something you've worked on, and knowing that other people are watching it, you feel differently. And so we integrated all of those feelings and ideas into the film as it evolved. So it was... yeah, Taghi and I had final cut, but we did it in collaboration with many audience screenings because of what Taghi said earlier, that we were wanted to and succeeded, I think, in making a film that is understandable to people who don't know anything about the coup, and we would invite people purposely who knew nothing, and then the other side, people who were historians themselves, who knew, and they would end the film and they'd say, I learned things here I didn't ever know about. So that was a good balance.
Yeah, exactly. That was exactly my next question. One of the challenges on such a long project is to keep the joy and the vitality going on. And what we can really hear is that both of you know about it. Walter, you're a professional, but even Taghi, even after the years, after 2 or 3 years working on so many hours, how do you keep this joy alive? How don't you get tired of watching the same images 100 times over?
Because it was a constantly evolving investigation and storytelling. The energy that you see on the screen is the real energy of us working on it and discovering stuff. I mean, it's the first film I've ever worked on where you are editing it, you shoot stuff that comes into the edit, it changes the structure. At one point, there's this meta layer where, in fact, We even show a cut sequence to somebody in the film and show it to them, and that's in the film itself. So it's the search that was a real thrill that kept the energy, driving us forward. And when you're looking for something, and that changes the shape of the film, that gives you that inbuilt momentum. And so the joy or the excitement was a real thing that we tried to also convey that on the screen, because that's what it was like, behind the camera, behind the screen.
One of the big discoveries we made was the character of Norman Derbyshire, who was a tiny blip on the horizon, if that, when we started the film. But in the course of the film, especially in the last 8 months, year of making the film, he became this huge searchlight that was beaming information about the coup, because he wrote the coup. He was the co-author of the plan with Donald Wilbur, his CIA counterpart, one of his CIA counterparts, and he ran the coup from Cyprus, because the Iranian Mossadegh had kicked the British out, and so the British didn't go away. They just went to Cyprus and kept in radio contact with all of the agents that they had put in place for years and years and years. Norman Derbyshire, played by Ralph Fiennes in our film, had been in Iran since he was 19 years old as a soldier during World War II. And all of this information came pouring out once we uncorked that bottle, so to speak. He's also, you said earlier that there was no hidden information. Well, that's not true. There is information here that's never been seen in this way before, so directly as you see it here. I mean, Norman Derbyshire admits on camera to the kidnapping, torture, and murder of an Iranian general. He badmouths the head of MI6 at the time. He says how much he spent on the coup. He says, I ran the coup for our side. He explicitly links the British to this coup. And the result of that is the diminution of the role played by the American Kermit Roosevelt, who was a master at self-promotion, and who wrote a book about it because of the British unwillingness to admit to any involvement in the coup. That took center stage. And people, Iranians included, many of them think, well, the America's the bad guy in this. So this is a very visible cinematic rebalancing of the scales of history.
And actually, Derbyshire was cut out from the End of Empire series that was shot at the time in the 80s. And you never found these hidden tapes, right? You just found the transcript of the tapes that you used in the film with Ralph Fiennes. This is incredible. Where could these images be, and why were they exactly cut out?
Well, let's be clear. We do an investigation. We interview people. We are not saying categorically here that it was 100% filmed. There's evidence there from different people giving different contradictory testimonies about was he filmed, was he not filmed. The one thing that is not in question, 100% not in question, is that audio tape was made. The transcript are his own words. He was interviewed, and the authenticity and the veracity of this transcript as being Derbyshire's authentic words are not under question. He said these things. And imagine you're telling the most important story about your country's history in the last 70 years, the one event that changed the fate of an entire country, its relationship with the West and the region as well, and the consequences of the coup, as you see in American and British foreign policy later. You're telling that story, and then you find the transcript from an interview with a man who masterminded the coup and ran it. This was a movie written and directed by Norman Derbyshire. And in the absence of the British government officially admitting to its role in the coup, that transcript stands in for that admission. And so that's a pretty amazing thing to find. And to bring to life with this brilliant performance by Ralph Fiennes. That's where our film can claim to be the first in the way it tells the story. The full Derbyshire transcript, brought to life, the most compelling, explosive content brought to life in an interview with Ralph Fiennes. And where is that tape? Where is the film, if it was shot? You tell me. We don't know. And we still don't know. But we ask very legitimate questions. We ask journalistic questions backed up by journalistic technique.
Yes, it works like a treasure hunt, actually.
Yeah, it is a treasure. It's a historic treasure.
I have another question regarding Derbyshire by Saba. Do you think interviewing with the Derbyshire family members would have added something to the documentary?
We found the Derbyshire family very late in the day. In fact, just like a few weeks before we finished the film. It would have added, it may well be in the follow-up, it would have added some color to his personality or his family life or his personal life. But I know for a fact, having now met a lot of the Derbyshire family, I can tell you a great story about that.
They saw the film. They watched the film. We found Norman Derbyshire's daughter, who confirmed that the photograph that we use in the film is her father. That was important because until that moment, we didn't have a confirmation of a photo that it was him. We didn't have a photographic evidence of Derbyshire, what he looks like, who he was. But that led to the London Film Festival. After Telluride, the London Film Festival selected the film. It programmed 2 screenings. Those screenings sold out in just less than a day. They organized a 3rd screening. That sold out as well. Huge reception at the festival. It was nominated for the Grierson Award at the London Film Festival. And though we had a whole bunch of our friends and cast and crew and extended family who couldn't get tickets. So we hired our own cinema in the middle of the London Film Festival program and invited everybody to come along, 150-seat theater. And that screening was amazing. On the 6th of October, 2019, Ralph Fiennes came with his team. John le Carré, the late John le Carré, came with his wife, Jane. They were in the audience. 2 of Mossadegh's grandsons, one of whom is in the film. In fact, it was him, Hedayat, who gave me the Derbyshire transcript and all the other papers that you see in the film from his basement. And 11 members of the Derbyshire family came, including Mrs. Derbyshire. And so they saw the film together at the same screening. It was an amazing, unique and electrifying experience. At the end of the screening, the Derbyshire family hugged the Mossadegh family. That was a bit of a surreal moment with me, and they wanted a selfie with me. We had a selfie with them. And his eldest son came to me that very morning with a pile of papers, more documents about his dad. They've told me a lot of very interesting things about Norman Derbyshire, which would have created a sense of his character. It wouldn't have revealed more secrets because they told me when they were kids, he sat them down and told them what he does for a living. Settle down, kids. I'm going to tell you what my job is. I'm going to tell you this once, and you will never talk about it again. And they didn't. So they were not privy to the details of his working life. They just knew that he was MI6. So it most likely wouldn't have shed light on the coup itself from the family. It would have added a lot of character detail and color and texture. Gosh, we all wish we would have been there at that screening. And it also breaks my heart for here in Geneva, because here it would have been a very special screening too, because, as we saw, many of the interviews we shot in the film were shot in Switzerland, near Geneva or in the Geneva region. And there are tight links between Iran and Switzerland. Mossadegh himself studied in Neuchâtel. And can you tell us a little bit more about the links between the 2 countries and who would have been here today with us in the cinema?
The links are great. The links are, in fact, Geneva, Switzerland and Iran and the coup. And the Shah studied in Switzerland. He went to that fancy schmancy school that you have, La Rosée. He was a playboy on the ski slopes when he was a young prince, until his father called him back and said, "You got to come back. You need to be king." Mossadegh got his PhD, one of the very first Iranians to get a PhD in law from Neuchâtel University. They had an amazing centenary celebration of his PhD graduation, which I filmed. I went to Neuchâtel and filmed that. Mossadegh's eldest grandson, Mr. Abdul Majid Bayat, lives in Geneva. He has a built an entire foundation to the memory of his grandfather, Mossadegh Foundation in Carouge. Go visit. It's an amazing treasure trove of materials and memorabilia. When the coup failed, the Rashidian brothers, I have it on good authority from somebody else, they fled to Geneva. Norman Derbyshire was posted to Geneva after the coup for a while. The Shah's general, Fazlullah Zahedi, who was replacing Mossadegh as the prime minister, he became prime minister for a short time. The Shah didn't want him to hang around for too long. He was dismissed and forced into exile. He came and bought a house on Lake Geneva in Montreux, the same house that his son now lives in, same house in which we've interviewed his son, Ardashir Zahedi, who became the Shah's son-in-law, ambassador and foreign minister. The links are endless. The links are endless. And there was one other connection. It'll come back to me. Oh yeah, Alan Dulles met with the Shah's sister Ashraf in Geneva as well to prime her for involvement in the coup. So Switzerland is the nerve center of the coup in Iran. You guys should get a medal for that, or there should be a plaque.
Absolutely. In the questions, there is a question from Daniela. What's your method to find the central theme, the red thread, the fil rouge, as we say in French, in a documentary? Especially if you have such a huge amount of material and not a script like in feature film. How do you find this? Do you use red thread in English? The fil rouge, the line?
Yeah, we understand. Well, that's really created in the editing. All movies are made in the cutting room, fiction or non-fiction, but more so the documentary, and much more so a documentary without a script. And so it's the art and craft of the editing, and that's really without Walter there would be no Coup 53.
What we did just as a way to central ourselves is I made 4 long timelines of nothing but historical experts talking about the coup and all the questions. So it was just nothing but talking heads of people who've written books about the coup. And then all Western people, Americans mostly. And then a timeline of nothing but Iranians talking about the coup. And then one timeline of nothing but archive about the coup, arranged chronologically. And then nothing but the interviews from End of Empire, that was the documentary made by Granada in 1983 through 1985, interviewing mostly British, a few Iranians in exile about the coup. And we had access to all that material. That was another treasure trove of material, because all of the outtakes from that series were given to the BFI and for public access. And we were able, thankfully, after years of negotiations, to get access to that. So that was another thread. And then there was another thread of just miscellaneous bits with Taghi doing his investigations. And so we had 5 threads looking for the red one. And then we sat down and looked at all of them. It was a week of just looking and thinking. And then we spent 2 weeks writing out story cards of scenes that were potentially going to be in the film. And we put them up on the wall. You see that in the background to some of the shots. And it had a very different beginning than our present beginning, but it had a beginning and it had an end. And it covered 2 whole panels of the editing room. And that ultimately became the 8-hour assembly of the film. And we thought of it like a Persian carpet, that we had these threads of different colors, and we were going to weave them together in an interesting historical pattern, which is what we did. But without question, the reddest of the red threads is Norman Derbyshire. And when he emerged telling what he told, he's not the only thing by any means, but he's the most vibrant because of his role in the coup, which was essential, and also the fact that his interview was conducted for this End of Empire series and never used for reasons, mysterious reasons that you can see when you watch the film. So that's in a nutshell. That's how it happened.
And how came the idea to you to have Ralph Fiennes to say the quotes?
That was also Walter's idea.
Yes, we had the transcript, and what are we going to do with it? We can't simply show it on screen as text. We have to voice it. And traditionally, the way documentaries do this is you hire an actor to do this. And to get us up to speed, our associate editor at the time, Dan Farrell, who was a voice person, read it. And so we began to use that to help us structure the film. And then naturally we thought, well, Dan Farrell is our friend, but it would be good to get somebody with a name, an actor with a name that we can put up on the marquee of the film. And so we started battling ideas about that. And then it was coming home from lunch one day, I thought of Ralph Fiennes. I'd met Ralph on The English Patient now 25 years ago. But we'd kept in touch over the years, and he'd actually phoned me a couple of months earlier about working on his film, The White Crow, about the exile of Rudolf Nureyev. And I was unavailable because I was working with Taghi, but I read that script, and I was thinking about Ralph, and I said, "What about Ralph?" And yes, that's a very good idea. He's just a perfect person. And so we contacted him, and he said, "Come on over to the National Theater and tell me more," which we did with our laptop of the film as it was at that point. This is back in 2018. And we showed him that stuff. We showed him the transcript, and he immediately put 2 and 2 together and got 18. He understood all the implications of this because he plays M in the James Bond films. He really wanted to do it. He said, "There's only 2 problems. This beard that I have, I'm not going to shave this off because this is my Mark Anthony beard, and schedule, because I'm just so busy. But we'll work it out." And we said, about the beard, don't worry. We don't want you to even get close to imitating what Derbyshire looked like. In fact, we didn't even know what Derbyshire looked like at that time. So just think of yourself as the channel by which his words are going to come onto the screen. And it was shortly after that that Taghi got the capstone idea, which is to film Ralph Fiennes as Norman Derbyshire in the very same suite in which all of the other End of Empire London interviews were conducted. And that's what you see in the film.
I have another question. That's a very easy one from Carolina. The film paints a damning picture of British vis-à-vis Iran. Can one safely say that British-Iranian relations have never been and never will be amicable for the foreseeable future?
Well, you can never say never. It is a pretty terrible picture of the British, but it really doesn't just apply to Iran. It's the British through the entire empire. It's Britain's dark history in its colonial past, which hasn't gone away. Nothing is definite. There is no reason why relationships can't improve, can't get better. I think an admission to its part would be a first step. I think truth can be a very clarifying and healing factor in all this. To this day, to this hour, the British have not officially admitted to their part in this coup, which is an absurd open secret. Everybody knows it's so open. And if it wasn't, I mean, it is, but if it wasn't, Derbyshire has just done it in Coup 53 as the official spokesman for the British Secret Service involved in the coup. Of course, it affected Iran's relationship with Britain. It wasn't a great relationship before that. It was the relationship of an oppressor a colonial power. Even though Iran was never a colony, Iran was never part of the empire, it was treated as such. It was exploited for its resources, and there was a lot of meddling in its internal affairs. They got out of India and they replanted India 2.0 in Iran. They even imported Indian workers, labor, into the refinery in Abadan to work on the oil machines. But truth will help this. And if they come clean about this, there could be an opening of a dialogue. It's like, apology is too far-fetched. Apology will be like one step too far to ask at this stage. The owning their part in it would be a big first step. So I'm an eternal optimist. You're not an optimist if you don't spend 11 years making the same film, hoping it'll go somewhere. So there's always room for better diplomacy, better relationship based on truth and mutual respect. It comes down to respect. The problem with the empire is that it was a racist project, not respecting the dignity and the humanity of the global South. It boils down to that. And the moment you think of others as less than you, that's what you can do. That's what you're capable of. The moment you look at the other human beings as equal human beings, then there's a way to look forward.
Incredible.
End of speech from Taghi Amirani.
Wow, what a conversation, and what a pleasure and a delight to hear both of you, and to have a behind-the-scenes conversation about this film. We could have stayed so long to hear you, and there is so much about Geneva here, between the boson, the Higgs bosons, and the CERN, to the Rosé and the Charles skiing at the Rosé, Neuchâtel and the PhD, and of course the spies hidden here in Geneva, and all the relatives living around. I think we really have to do this in-person screening here in Geneva, and I hope you'll both be there as fast as possible.
As soon as theaters open, I'll be on a plane to Geneva. And two things for your audience. If you have time, do make an appointment and go and visit the Mossadegh Foundation. They'll be happy to show you around.
In Carouge?
It's in Carouge. There's a very nice patisserie just up the road, by the way. I think it's Place d'Armes. Place d'Armes, I think. Anyway,
yes.
Yeah, it might be it's the tram number 12, I think. If I'm not wrong.
Absolutely.
And also go online and share the movie with your friends. Tell people to watch it. We are bringing the film generally to Europe, including Switzerland and France and the rest of the world shortly. And follow us on social media. And if you like the film, tell people about it. Because we don't have a distributor, we don't have the big bucks. The entire marketing department is this and the poster on the wall behind me. That's the marketing department. So
yeah, but it's Taghi and Walter, right? The best ambassadors a film could dream of.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to both of you. So we'll be back together in Geneva as soon as possible. And we cannot wait for this screening. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.